Brisbane stage, Richard Slater.
Thanks, that's cool. Wow, what an intro. I've certainly never been compared to the Beatles. I hope that was recorded. That's good on the resume. I'm a little husky today because I got up at 10 to 4 Brisbane time. I was at an awards thing last night and was very fortunate for the project that I'm going to share some of the stories about with you today. Won an award for the best entertainment website in Australia for this year. So there was an after party, and I admit I may have participated a touch, but I did manage to get to bed by about 12:30, and then of course the 4 o'clock flight. It's pretty good. But let me just make a couple of comments first. What a great way to start the event with an Irishman telling a yarn. Fantastic. Just great. And I love some of the observations about connections there, because I guess working in the web and on the internet, it really is all about connections. You know, connections between data and content and people. And I guess even in my career, as I look back over the last sort of 15 years ago or so of being involved in the internet and being a kind of non-creative person, but being a little bit creative, and being a non-technical person, having an understanding and a passion for the technical, I can see how the magic happens when those two things cross over and the connections come together. So I'm also interested in talking to Yui afterwards about emerging patterns, because that's kind of a really big thing, as he would know, in the news space. The challenge to find the first story or the emerging story that then becomes a big story. Obviously, it's you know, a fairly interesting thing to know, and I would imagine that would be worth money to somebody. So that would be nice. So the other interesting thing was, I guess I met Paul and Carl to talk about what I might discuss, and they kind of put me in this section which was about listening, and I showed them a bit of the presentation that I kind of worked on before. And it's interesting because actually there's so much in my presentation about listening, and I hadn't actually engineered it for this session specifically. So when I went back to look at it to try and make it a bit more appropriate, perhaps, I actually didn't really need to do much. So I'm going to tell you a story, and there's a lot of listening in it, I hope. And this is really a story about just a small group of people in Brisbane who are trying to do something innovative. I'm going to start here. So there are bands and artists out there all over the place, recording music, playing music, just trying to get their sound out there. And today there might be lots of people listening. There may only be one person listening. But also today, if there's only one, then that's often enough. Because if that one person loves the sound enough, then the chances are that they have the tools to share it and to tell somebody else, maybe one person, maybe a few more. And there are so many tools to spread the word nowadays. It's so easy to just share that moment of excitement when you first hear a sound that you love for the first time, and you just want to tell somebody else about it, a friend or even just anybody, and just kind of shout it out into the ether. You know, in a handful of characters maybe, or maybe you want to take a little bit more time and really describe what happened to you when you first heard that song, and start, you know, contributing back to the community, let them know how fantastic it was. And who knows, somebody else might just pick up what you tweeted, what you wrote, what you blogged, and the sharing cycle continues. There's just so much activity and so much data out there that could tell us so much if we just could measure it or listen to it, or organise it even, which is what we've done. We've organised it and built a system to just look at all of the data out there that's about music, the blogs, the music blogs, the sharing, the social sites, the perhaps illegal pirating, sharing systems, to try to figure out what are the 99 most popular songs online right now. Now, I have to apologise because at this point of the presentation, my artistic skills kind of petered out a bit, so I'm not going to sketch the rest of them. So what do we call it? We call it wearehunted.com. And to us, and we hope to people who experience it, it's a new way to discover new music. And we like to think of it as a new chart for the digital generation. So when it launched in April last year, these are some of the things that were said about it. which was pretty incredible for us, and especially incredible when I tell you a bit about how many people actually work on this thing and where we work from. So, you know, why I picked it up, TechCrunch, to those who are perhaps non-technical, I mean, these online publications are like where things happen. If you get picked up by these guys, the world, or at least the world of your peers, know what you're doing. Mashable, even Mumbrella, Tim Burrows, who never actually responds to any of my emails. So Tim, if you're out there, call me, or perhaps respond to one of them. But even Tim picked it up, was obviously impressed with it, and even into the mainstream of news.com.au. So I get the question really is, why am I telling you this story? Well, because we're at an event which is really about curiosity, and it's about innovation and making things happen and starting up and doing things that are new. And I want to just share with you the story of pulling this thing together, of how we did it in Brisbane and what happened along the way. There's nothing particularly hypothetical about it or theoretical. It's just my practical experience of it, which I want to share with you, and maybe you can take something out of that. There are some lessons, I suppose, that we've learned, and as much as hunted really the central idea of it, it is about listening to the internet, listening to the data, and trying to make something tangible and useful out of that. And I suppose for us also, this journey's been about listening and just learning from the lessons that happen along the way. So I guess the first lesson is this for us. Innovation often happens when you least expect it. Now, that doesn't mean you can't plan to innovate or to do something new, but I'm not sure it's planning in the traditional sense. You've just got to have enough pieces in place, and I guess the willingness to let go. If you remember that Luna cartoon that Kevin showed us at the beginning, the willingness then to just let go and have a go. But maybe if I tell a bit more of the story, it will help. So What News is a small business of 8 people. There's 5 of us. We're primarily engineers, other than me and one other. 5 of us in Brisbane, 2 on the Gold Coast, 1 in Perth. We have a news search engine called What News, and we've built a bunch of technology that powers this thing. Some people might refer to it as a semantic search engine, but effectively we've built some software to analyze text and understand entities, people, companies, locations, topics in the text. And when we understand the text better, then we can create interesting experiences for users. So we don't do any marketing. This is a kind of typical freemium model in a way, if you like, where the idea is build a great product that's free that people will use. That is your marketing. People will talk about it, and hopefully they'll come back and they'll want more, and at some point you'll be able to monetize that. So that's how we market ourselves, and that's who we are. Now, we were running a news search engine from around the end of 2007, and things were going quite well. This is us basically, effectively, it's user traffic, just increasing and increasing between 2007 and towards the end of 2008. So everything was going quite nicely until we met 2 young guys, hipsters, maybe the expression one uses nowadays. I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I actually do think they look pretty hip, which is a good thing. But anyway, 2 young guys that now call themselves Native Digital, Nick and Ben. They have really less people than us, less money than us, you know, less technology for sure, certainly more design prowess. But they had an idea that was really quite interesting, and we just bumped into them at a session like this, but much smaller in Brisbane. And they said, hey, you know, we just think that this thing, the charts, the music chart, is a bit defunct. And we've got an idea that we want to run past you. So that was the idea. But as magnificent as he is, and he is, well, let's just look at him for a moment. He's quite magnificent. He really is. I just stand a little closer and perhaps some of it will rub off on me. But I mean, you know, he's dominating the charts, and or was at least when we had this conversation. Obviously he was touring, and you know, you just kind of think to yourself, how can that be? I mean, yes, he's a fantastic musician, and yes, there's people out there who love his stuff, and that's fantastic. But are the 12-year-olds, the 14-year-olds listening to him? I don't think so. Are they downloading his stuff and sharing it on Pirate Bay and whatnot? You know, probably not. So the theory was there's something wrong with the chart. There are other metrics. We know they're out there. If we could somehow get to them and then expose them, that'd be pretty cool. So that was the hunch. And so I guess this moves us to my next lesson, which was after coming up with that idea and we built a suite of technology to do something vaguely similar already. We said, hey, let's just stitch this stuff together and just get something out there and see what happens. We built it in about, once we come up with a rough idea, we built it in about 4 weeks. I mean, yes, we had a big code base that had done something similar, so that certainly helped. We came up with a design, the guys came up with a brand, and we just launched it. We didn't have, contracts between us and this other entity. We just had a handshake and, hey, let's try it, And if something interesting happens, then we'll sit down and deal with that then. But let's not let anything else get in the way of this idea. Let's just take it to market. So we moved really fast. We kept the costs down, and we just said, let's do it. So it's all about just get it out there, launch, and then iterate. I mean, in the web world, in the corporate world, this is just not the approach that's taken. Although I do believe, and I'm optimistic that there's change everywhere and there's enthusiasm for different ways of doing things like this. So the launch went really well. In the space of about, I forget, but 48 hours or 72 hours or something, 100,000 people had come through that site with zero marketing. And search hadn't even picked it up yet, so you couldn't really find it in Google. But it really was off that Wired article on how it spread around the internet from there on, no marketing dollars. So at that point, we had to sit down and say, guys, what are we going to do about this? We now have to take this seriously and actually invest in this thing because it really was intentionally only half built. So we actually had a lot of work to do. So things were going well from there, but by week 6, we hit a really big stumbling block. We got blacklisted by YouTube. So just to explain what that means, I mean, we're operating in the music space and you kind of try, it's a very difficult, litigious space to operate in, especially if you're trying to be creative and innovative. So we were streaming songs from, and I should make that point, the site isn't just a chart, it does actually allow you to stream the music. We don't encourage download. We make links through to buying the tunes. Really, obviously, we encourage people to buy and to support the artist, but we also stream the tracks. We don't store them on our server, though. I want to just get that out there. So we were streaming from YouTube, and the site just broke. So I guess another lesson is, if you're not breaking stuff, then you're probably not moving fast enough. So I guess to explain, we were going through YouTube's open kind of backdoor for the geeks amongst us, an API, an application programming interface where you can access YouTube data, including the video files. The thing was they have a kind of set of terms of service, and we probably hadn't read the small print, and we weren't showing the video, we were just playing the audio, so we were probably contravening it, but nobody told us what we were doing wrong. We were just shut down. So we had a music site that was all about streaming music. We had no music, which was a bit of a problem. So at that point, it was battle stations. What do we do? Well, we have a relationship with What News. We've licensed the brand from them, but that's it. So they have a Google account manager. I went to the What If person, who's your Google account manager in Sydney, left messages, finally got her on the phone, etc., etc. I'll talk to somebody at YouTube in the US. You can imagine what happened with that. It just went absolutely nowhere. I tried to contact Google. Trying to get Google on the phone doesn't really work. I did try. Hopeless. So we really needed to look for alternatives because we had a site that had no music on it. So at that point, we decided, right, we need to get music from elsewhere. So we went looking to MySpace. And this time we did it differently. I actually approached them. I sat down and said, here's the site. Here's what we're doing. Would you mind if we use some of your videos and display it? And they're like, hey, anything to get one up on YouTube, no problem. So that all went really well. But ironically, or just interestingly out of chance, literally the same day, like 30 minutes before I walked into the meeting with MySpace, I got a message back that it looked like things were quite good with YouTube. I don't know if you guys recognize this person. His name's Fred Wilson. He's probably the most famous US VC in the tech space. He is the founding, his company, Union Square Ventures, is the founding venture capital behind Twitter, previously owned Delicious, and a whole bunch of other really interesting stuff. Now, he's a big music fan. He loves all the music stuff that's going out on the web, and he really likes, or did at the time, especially We Are Hunted. And one day he just kind of Skyped to my business partner, Steve, and, hey, Steve, how's it all going? Do you need any help with anything? And Steve said, oh, yeah, actually, we've got this problem. with YouTube. We got switched off. You know, we can't speak to anybody. Could you give us a hand? So Fred moves in pretty interesting circles. So he's mates with David Ewan, who's a strategic vice president of strategic partnerships at Google. So Fred got on the phone or Skyped David, and literally within half an hour we had an email back from this guy saying, I'm going to look into it, but can you tell Fred that I'm helping you out? So I don't know, read into that whatever you will. There were rumours about Google acquiring Twitter, I suppose, around that time. So within a week we got switched back on. So I guess the moral of the story is there. It's through those difficulties that we could never have foreseen, especially given that we didn't even try to look that far. We didn't plan that far down. We were forced to build a more robust platform. We had never done video streaming before. Now we were only doing audio streaming. Now we could do video streaming. We were only using YouTube. Now we added other sources, MySpace. Now we knew somebody at Google. You know, we had a better relationship with Fred Wilson. We met somebody at YouTube, MySpace. It just goes on, and all of that somewhat legitimised what we were doing with effectively permission from MySpace and YouTube. So the other, I guess, truth that we've happened across in this music space, and I won't dwell too long on this is kind of the central concept of where music, I think, is going now, that it's about access, not ownership. iTunes is great, and it's dominated, and it's about downloading and buying. The next phase is about streaming. When you've got a big, dirty, great internet connection, you don't need to have the file sitting on your desktop or on your hard drive. It can be sitting in the cloud somewhere, and you can access it from anywhere you like. And there are some really interesting players that are emerging. Spotify is a massive one in the UK and Europe. Now, out of all this little bit of noise that we managed to generate, Spotify actually approached us about 8 weeks after we were turned back on from YouTube and said, hey guys, we love what you're doing. Would you like to expose your charting data inside the Spotify application? So it doesn't really do it justice, but effectively you can go in and see the chart and play the chart inside of Spotify using Spotify's tunes. Now, this is a company that's in Sweden and London. You know, they're not in Brisbane. And we do some stuff with them out on the web. About 3 weeks after that, Wired suddenly wrote another story on us. And the headline was, Tech Design for Music Charts Analyzes Stock Market. Now, the site they're referring to is Macquarie Edge, which is a new-ish retail share trading application. And we had done some work for them. But the Wired guys got wind that we, who run the music site, were doing stuff for them. You can imagine what Macquarie's PR had to say about this. What the... Yeah. But in actual fact, they absolutely loved it. And the other lesson here is that PR rewards the unexpected, and the likes of a Seth Godin goes on about that all the time. You know, if you're different and you're remarkable, well, people will remark upon you. So, I mean, you know, imagine that, a small Brisbane-based, 5 people here, 2 on the Gold Coast, 1 in Perth, teams up with Macquarie Powerhouse, and, you know, Macquarie Wired magazine writes about that. The truth was that we had been working with them for some time, and the tech does run both sides. I could go on and on about this story. We've just released some new stuff with MySpace, and so now, you know, you can actually go and effectively we're tying into the MySpace real-time data stream that tells us everything that's happening on MySpace right now, and we've built a radio station where the DJs are the 125 million users of MySpace. But, you know, that's come out of relationships that we've built over time very organically with these much bigger players than us. So I guess the moral of the story is we just see so many opportunities to apply what we're doing, and I think even though maybe in some circles you could say we could plan better, personally I just love the way that we've done it organically, and at the moment it is actually working for us, and we're just excited about all the other accidents and listening and waiting for those accidents to happen in 2010 and beyond. So I hope you found that story interesting, and thank you very much. It's been an honour to be here.